Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Mengs, and I welcome you guys to a short video about Advanced Wars. I'd like to talk a little bit about the CO tier lists, because many times when I'm playing Advanced Wars, you may hear me refer to the different COs as tiers, like that CO is tier 2 and that other CO is tier 3, and I would just like to explain exactly what I mean by that. Because if there's one thing that's very apparent about Advanced Wars 2, and 1 for that matter, is that it's not really balanced. The COs are very different in strength, some are blatantly broken, while others are more balanced. So in this video I'm just going to go through the different COs and explain what tier they belong to and why. So as I said, I've played this game for 10 years. I have a lot of experience with it. I played frequently against human players around my skill level. And yeah, based on that experience and my research, I'm just going to explain to you why the different COs are of different tiers. So we'll start with Andy. He is a tier 2 CO. Now many people think he is tier 1 because he's like so average, but that's not really true because Andy has one of the best superpowers in the game in hyper upgrade. Mainly because of that, he is tier 2 instead of tier 1. That power is so broken, like it would have been overpowered if it were only for its 5 hit point repair, but on top of that, he also gets a firepower and a mobility increase, which is just broken. And it's very cheap as well, it only costs 6 stars, so Andy is well above average. When we come to Max, Max is a tier 1 CO. I actually think he is very weak. Many people probably think Max is a lot higher because he wrecks face in close combats, but if you ever played against a good human opponents, you will notice how valuable artillery and rockets hidden in the right places are. Now, I usually play with Fog of War. Indirects become a lot weaker when you play without Fog of War, so I suppose you could say he might be tier 1 if you play with Fog of War, and maybe higher if you play without it. Because it's a lot easier for him to take out the artillery and rockets when when his vision isn't obstructed. So, but yeah, usually I play all of my games with Fog of War, which is why I don't rank Max very highly. Also, the fact that he doesn't deploy any artillery or rockets means that whoever he's playing against can move very freely. And whenever I'm playing against a human opponent, I always assume that there are rockets and artillery hidden in nearby forests. And that greatly changes the way I move. I have to scout them out, I have to expend units to scout out the forests, I have to constantly be aware of how I'm moving my troops. When I'm playing against Max, I feel like I have the freedom to move units wherever I want, and that gives me a lot of freedom. So yes, his units are strong and his superpower is fearsome, and if you let him get a lot of momentum, he becomes very dangerous, but usually you can just shut him down so easily with a few well-placed indirect combat units. Then we come to Sami. Sami is tier 3. She is very powerful. Like, just for the fact that she captures properties faster. It's almost impossible to interrupt capping when you play against Sami. Because when she initially captures a city, or when she starts her capture, she's going to bring the property down to 5 hit points, because she captures at a speed of 15. And since her infantry captures so fast, you have to bring her infantry down to 2 hit points for it to not capture the building on the next turn. Normally, you just need to inflict a single point of damage to an infantry unit to make sure it doesn't cap on 2 turns. With Sami, you need to inflict 8 points of damage to an infantry unit to interrupt the cap. That is a pretty huge deal. Like, you just basically have to deal 80% more damage to her infantry in order to interrupt the cap, which is a massive deal. And when you play against other human opponents, the capturing of properties is everything, unless you're playing a pre-deployed map, of course, but I'm basically speaking in a versus game mode, which is the most common thing to do. And her superpower, which allows her to capture properties in a single turn, is just borderline broken. She uses that with a few well-placed infantry. She can just dominate the game. Like, even if she is weak, like, she has a 10% reduction in firepower on her vehicles and aircrafts. Like, she still just dominates the game because she just steals all your income. So Sami is very difficult to play against, extremely much so. And of course, the max spam is still very real. Alright, then we come to Nell. Nell is a tier 4 CO. She is borderline tier 5. She is extremely powerful. Like, people don't realize much of the time how broken Nell actually is. She can pretty much beat almost every single CO in the game, except for the tier 5 COs, which I'll explain later. The thing about Nell, which makes her so broken, is the fact that her luck-based damage is hit point-based. It's not just a bonus to her firepower, she literally deducts hit points from the enemy she's fighting against, which means that she can go up against Neo-tanks with infantry and do 5 hit point damage to the Neo-tanks. When she uses her superpower, she can deal up to 9 or even 10 hit point damage, which is basically a one-shot. She can one-shot any single units with her weakest unit, like an infantry with 1 hit point left, can completely wipe out a Neo-tank. I've seen it happen, which of course is just broken. So if you ever play against Nell, you just have to make sure you do not build expensive units. You want to spam tons of weak units, because that's what she'll be doing if she knows how to play Nell, or he knows how to play Nell. So yeah, she's tier 4, extremely broken. Then of course we come to Hachi. I don't think anyone's going to be surprised here. He's a tier 5 CO. He's one of the 2 only tier 5 COs in this game, the other one being Sturm. Though, when up against Sturm, he is slightly weaker than Sturm. Sturm is able to take out Hachi, but Hachi is still more broken than any other commander in the game, save Sturm. You know, his superpower just allows him to build units at half price. He'll just overwhelm you, no matter what kind of map you're playing on. And especially if there's a lot of cities, he'll just completely overwhelm you. The fact that he can recruit units in locations where the map normally doesn't allow you to recruit locations. I mean, bases are very valuable because they allow you to reinforce. Like if you capture a forward base, you can reinforce units and you can get them to where they need to be more quickly. And Hachi just opens up so many locations when he uses his superpower. Though most of the time you just want to use barter. And what's so fearsome about Hachi is the fact that his powers are so cheap. Like 6, I think it's 5 stars combined for his superpower, which is just ridiculous. He's basically Adder with a better power. Alright, on to Blue Moon. We come to Olaf. Olaf is a tier 1 CO. Though he becomes tier 2 on larger maps. Now Olaf is pretty balanced, you know, he's strong in the snow and weak in the rain. His Winter Fury superpower is very good. Like, Blizzard is good too, but Winter Fury is also extremely good. Like, any power that does hit point based damage is very good because it slowly turns the tide of the battle. But the larger the map, the better Winter Fury becomes, because the more money based damage it deals. And the more properties there are, and the more units there are on the properties, the more income he drains from the opponent on the subsequent turn. So, Olaf, as I said, tier 1 on small maps, tier 2 on larger maps. Then we come to Grich. He is a tier 3 CO, mainly because, you know, his artillery are so damn powerful. Many people think that you want to spam a lot of rockets with Grits. This is not true. You just want to spam a lot of artillery, because the fact that artillery have a range of 2 in total, or 3, they have a range of 2 to 3. The fact that he gets 1 additional range means that you basically just increase the range of his artillery by 50% on a day-to-day power. Whereas rockets go from 5 to 6, which is not that impressive. But artillery essentially get their range doubled, or sorry, increased by 50. Not doubled, but yeah, they just get a lot of increased range. So when you play with Grits, you just use your infantry as shield, because Grits units aren't any, like, they aren't harder to, sorry, they aren't easier to, no, how am I going to say this? Yeah, his units doesn't have less defense, that's what I was going to say. But they do have reduced firepower, 20% less. But his infantry are fine, compared to Advanced Wars 1 when his infantry was also weak. His infantry is completely fine now, so you just build a bunch of infantry and you place them, in front of the artillery. You have some missiles in the back, and the enemy really can't do anything. It's just a slow crawl. However, it needs to be said that it is pretty easy to defeat Grits if you're playing with a timer. Like, for example, some of my friends, we like to play with a 30-day limit, which means that after 30 minutes the guy with the most properties win. In those scenarios, Grit becomes tier 1, because think about Grit, that he turtles his way to victory. But if you somehow put a time requirement on him, he becomes very weak, because then you can just basically rush out and take the properties, and Grit is really bad when it comes to the capture game. So he kind of struggles a little bit with that, but given enough time he can beat anyone. He just needs to, like, turtle his way forward, and just leapfrog his artillery forward slowly. Alright, then we come to Colin. Colin is tier 4. He is ridiculously strong. One of the most overpowered and broken commanders in the entire game, bar none. You know, the fact that he gets reduced firepower is a very low price to pay, considering what he gets in return, which is the 20% deployment cost and the fact that he can spam his little power, which costs 2 stars, like all the time. And what really serves Colin well is the fact that every single CO gets a 10% boost in defense from their power. And this really helps Colin because he'll have his little power active nearly all the time, which means that you'll go up pretty much against a army that is 10% weaker in offense, but 10% stronger in defense most of the time. And there'll be about perhaps around 50% more of them than there are of you. The 50% being with the gold rush taken into calculation. And just the fact that he can get neo tanks in a scenario where you struggle getting medium tanks out on the board. He is just powerful. He will overwhelm you extremely quickly, and he is almost impossible to beat. Alright, let's move down to Green Earth. We have Eagle. Eagle is a tier 1 CO. There's really nothing that much special about him. He has a really good superpower, but it's very expensive, and you'll see it very rarely in most games. The problem with Eagle is that air units are really easy to shut down. When you play with Eagle, your opponent knows that you're going to spam a lot of battlecopters, so they will build a lot of anti-air to counter you. And a few missiles placed in strategic locations means your air units will be very worthless. Air units in general are not like something you want to base your game around. A few battlecopters every now and then, perhaps a fighter, occasionally can be very good to take your opponent by surprise. But the moment they get anti-air up, your air units are essentially shut down and they lose a lot of their they lose a lot of their value. Which means that I consider I consider Eagle to be a tier 1 CO. He's alright. He gets a little bit better on certain maps. I could say that maybe on a map with a lot of islands, he becomes a tier 2 CO because air units are very strong on such maps, but still, I don't really value him that highly. Drake is... Oh, sorry, I think I hit a button right there. There we go. Drake is a tier 1 CO. Like, he has a pretty good power, but the thing about Drake's power is that it's more annoying than it's actually good. The fact that you need to just build a couple more APCs and just be good at resupplying your stuff doesn't really make the game harder. The hit point drain is of course a problem, but nothing that can't be repaired. And the odd thing about Drake is that his boats aren't exactly that much better. They have one extra movement, which is of course pretty big. He's one of the few COs with a passive movement boost to any of his units. But their firepower isn't higher, and their defense is only 10% better, which is very odd, you know. You'd think they at least be up 20% like they used to be in Advanced Wars 1. But no, they're only 10%, so you barely notice any difference when doing naval combat with Drake. But it needs to be said, of course, that naval units are very weak in Advanced Wars 2. They're very overpriced, and they just don't really do a lot. I mean, battleships are okay, but they cost 28,000. Like, they're way too expensive, and the zone control they offer is good, but not worth it. I'd rather have 2 rockets, and, you know, they're just not good. Cruisers get defeated by battlecopters. Like, the problem with naval units is that they get too easily shut down by air units. Like, bombers will destroy any of your naval units really, really quickly, and their superior mobility means they will get the first strike on you. So yeah, but I guess on a map where players are forced to use naval units, like an island map without airports, Drake could be considered tier 2, I suppose. Alright. Then we come to Jess. Jess is tier 1. Jess is pretty underpowered in this game. Her 10% increased firepower for vehicles is hardly noticed. Like, a 10% boost in firepower isn't much. It rarely gives you value, unless, like, perhaps in some of the bigger engagements like rockets and neo-tanks, it becomes noticeable, but Jess is really not good. And the 10% reduced firepower on infantry means she will really struggle in the capture game. It's very difficult to use Jess's infantry to interrupt caps, for example. And infantry are very valuable units in any Advanced Wars game, because you need to constantly build them, using them as shields, use them to interrupt other infantry capping properties, so you don't have to use your more expensive units for land. And you really feel the lowered firepower. Jess is definitely among one of the weaker COs in the game. Her power is okay. The fuel and ammo restore is more like a nice little niche more than anything else. I've hardly felt it being useful in any of the games I've played her as. Sometimes it's a little nice, but most of the time it just doesn't do anything. Alright, down to yellow comment. Only overpowered COs here. Kanbei, tier 4. Broken as fuck. Kanbei is one of the strongest commanders in the game. Back in Advanced Wars 1, he was pretty balanced with the 20% firepower and defense boosts. But for some reason they decided to change him to a 30% increase instead in Advanced Wars 2, which just makes him impossible to go up against. Yes, his units are more expensive, but his units never fucking die, you know? He just has so much staying power. Like, yes, it's a little bit more tricky for him to get units out on the field, but when he does, they'll never die, and it's impossible to go cost-effective against him. You'll attack him, and he'll take no damage, and he fires back and kills a lot of your units in the process. And when he gets the first strike, don't even think about it. Yeah, Kanbei is not fun to play against, and his Samurai Spirit essentially makes him invincible for a turn. You can't touch him. Like, you can't even touch him. It's impossible. So yeah, Kanbei he's a problem. Tier 4. Almost tier 5. Almost, but no. Sonia! She is a tier 3 CO. Now many people may be surprised by this. What? Of course, if you play without Fog of War, then Sonia becomes tier 1. You know, but in Fog of War maps, I would consider her tier 3. Sonia has a lot of nice little buffs that aren't described well in her CO screen. Now, first things first, Sonia has bad luck in this game. It is not noted anywhere, but she does. Around half of the time, she'll do 1 hit point less in terms of damage, the same way that Flak works, except Flak has 1 to 2, and he has less bad luck, but Sonia will do it about 50% of the time, so you will notice it in many engagements. But the thing about Sonia is that her counterattacks are 50% stronger. This is very huge, because it means that normally first strikes are very powerful in Advanced Wars, because you attack first and then get retaliated upon. With Sonia, sometimes it's actually not cost effective to attack her, because she gets the 50% increased firepower on retaliation strikes, which is, needless to say, very, very strong. Of course, she gets increased vision in Fog of War, which is very good. You know, scouting is everything in Fog of War. Anyone who plays frequently against human opponents knows that. And of course, her power is just borderline broken. Her little power is extremely good. So is her superpower. Just being able to see through reefs and forests is game-breaking, because many strategies revolve around hiding units in the woods. And the fact that she can just counteract that is extremely powerful. Now, what her superpower actually does that many people aren't aware of is that it allows her to always get the first strike. So if you attack her, her units will attack first, with the 50% boosts. So it's pretty darn powerful. So many people actually don't exactly know how Sonia works, because her CO description doesn't reveal a whole lot. But she is very powerful. And needless to say, the question mark instead of her hit point intel, of course, can be counteracted by turning on animations whenever you fight against her. But me and my friends usually consider that cheating. We play without animations. It's extremely confusing to play against Sonia, because that 1 hit point medium tank could very well be a 10 hit point medium tank. And sometimes you have to waste a valuable unit trying to figure out which is which. So she's a very confusing CO to play against, extremely powerful, and her bad luck does very little to offset her strength. So she is tier 3. Then we come to another tier 3 CO in Sensei. Sensei is very difficult to play against because he is a ruthless mech spammer by nature. His battlecopters are fine. Like, battlecopters are good, and the fact that they have a lot of increased firepower makes them even better, but they are usually very easily shut down by fighters and anti-air. But the problem with Sensei is the fact that he'll just overwhelm you with mechs, and really strong mechs as well. So he's very difficult to play cost efficiently against, because he'll have so many mechs all the fucking time, and they'll just mech spam you. It's a broken strategy in this game. Me and my friends actually have a house rule saying that you can't have more than 5 mech units at the same time, simply because mech spam is so broken. Mechs are just cost efficient as hell. Alright, going down to Blackhole, we have Flak. He's a tier 1. Flak is arguably the worst CO in the entire game. Like, yes, he can sometimes do a lot of damage, but the problem with Flak is that since he's so unreliable, it just makes it very difficult to play with him. Because, you know, you want to be able to know how much damage you're going to inflict. The fact that you can't do that makes him very tough to play. And sometimes you'll just get that game-breaking, oh shit, I only did 1 damage to you when I was supposed to wipe out your units. Well, GG, you know. So yeah, it should be noted that when the computer plays Flak, it's a lot more dangerous because the computer always knows when it's going to get a strong blow. So sometimes when you play against Flak, you'll see the computer do very weird things, like attacking you with a 1-hit point infantry, because it knows it's going to get a super strong blow. Don't know why, but the computer always knows the outcome of each match before it happens, so it plays accordingly. Which is a little bit cheating, but hey, that's life. Then we come to Lash. She is a tier 3 CO, borderline tier 4. I definitely consider her the strongest among the tier 3 ones, maybe even call her tier 3.5. The thing about Lash is that she has no weaknesses. Like, there's nothing about her that is weak. Only strengths. She gets a 10% firepower increase for every defense star, which means that she'll almost... I hit the button again. She'll nearly always have a firepower advantage against you. Like in a city, her infantry become 30% firepower, you know? They become Kanbei infantry, pretty much, so... And her little power sucks, but her superpower is extremely broken because it doubles the defense stars she gets, which means that, oh, those infantry in the city, they are now 60-60, you know? She just gets so much defense and so much firepower, and defense is broken in this game. It's really strong. So, which is why Lash is so overpowered. The fact that she can move freely through all terrain when she uses her power is also a nice little niche. It allows her to... it gives her greater mobility, which is great. Now, speaking about mobility, we come to my favorite CO. He is tier 1 though. Adder is definitely tier 1. Like, I like him because he's balanced, but also because I think he's fun to play. So Adder is really nothing to be said about him, really. He just gets a movement boost, and he can use his power all the time. Now, you shouldn't underestimate Adder, definitely not. You know, the extra mobility is extremely good, and in the hands of a good player, like, I believe I can defeat most tier 2, and I've defeated tier 3 COs as well with Adder. Like, my friend plays Lash very, very frequently, and I usually defeat him with Adder. Even though Lash is very, very powerful, simply because I've learned to take extreme advantage of his mobility. I always plan every single move around the fact that I'm going to get my power soon. And that extra movement really means you can get that extra unit into combat, you can capture that property, you can get those units to the front lines quicker. But still, it's really not to be disputed. He is tier 1. You know, he is, there's really nothing special about him. Then we come to Hawke. Now this might surprise some of you, but Hawke is really only tier 2. Many people is going to say, oh, what Hawke? You should be tier 3 or tier 4. No, not really. Now, Hawke sounds very good on paper, but when you play him, it's really nothing special. I mean, yes, he has that 10% firepower boost, but you don't really notice it a whole lot when you play. 10% boost of firepower doesn't really affect you all that much. 10% defense boost is much more powerful. Firepower just isn't as good as defense in this game. And his power, while good, takes such a huge fucking long time to get. You know, you'll rarely see more than 2, perhaps 3 Black Storms in a very long game. Or Black Waves, if you happen to use that. And while it's good when it happens, I don't know. It's very difficult to me to pinpoint why I don't think Hawke is very good, but whenever I play Hawke, I just don't feel like he's doing much. And I've been frequently beaten by tier 2 and tier 3 COs while playing him. Alright, then we come to Sturm. Sturm is tier 5. Ridiculously broken. Many people don't realize how broken he is. The extra firepower and day-to-day defense, as well as the increased mobility from moving freely through all terrain, combined with the most broken power in the game, just means Sturm wrecks face. He wrecks Hachi's face. There is really no competition right here. I was going to teach my friend how to play Advanced Wars, and I let her play Sturm, and she beat me in her first game ever. Like, I went over the basics with her, and I told her how to do how the different units worked, and I allowed her to play Sturm. I played Adder, and she beat me. That's how broken Sturm is, you know. Alright. I do believe that's every single CO in the game, so that's my explanation of how the tiers work in this game, and I hope that shed a little bit more lights on, like when I say CO is tier 2 and tier 3, then at least you'll know what I'm talking about now. So the reason why I made this video is because I'd like to play a lot more war room missions, and I like to play mostly as tier 1 COs when I do the war room, maybe sometimes tier 2. Because I like, the higher tier you go, then the easier the war room mission gets. Like if I play a tier 4 CO on this last mission war room right here, then obviously it's going to be a lot more easy than if I play a tier 1 CO. So if you found this video informative, and as always, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.